Kyle, I got to get your thoughts on Miami going up 2-1 against the one-seeded Milwaukee Bucks.
The Heat have been very impressive so far this series. Now, granted, it comes with a giant caveat because Giannis has not been out there since suffering what I would assume is a tailbone injury that he had in game one. And, obviously, when it comes to the Heat, they're in the situation where, honestly, they know blood's in the water when it comes to the Bucks. Because if you don't have your number one player out there, obviously you're going up against just a battered opponent. And the Heat have not taken that for granted because in game three, Kev, you know it as well as I do, that game three was just an absolute blowout. I mean, they damn near won by 25 points, and it never seemed like Milwaukee could get into a consistent rhythm that entire game to keep up pace with the Heat. And that's despite the fact that the Heat don't have Tyler Hero since he broke two of his fingers in game one. Really, just the injuries have been kind of a focal theme of this series so far because Victor Oladipo went down with a torn patellar tendon in game three. So no team has been spared when it comes to the injury bug so far. But nonetheless, the Heat are going out there and doing exactly what they need to do. Jimmy Butler has been a man on a mission. The reemergence of playoff Jimmy has appeared once again, and the Bucks just don't have an answer for him whatsoever. In game two, you could say that maybe they had an answer for them, but that was mostly just because the Bucks offensively, they just could not miss. They damn near scored 140 points in game two. The Heat still scored 122. So, unless the Bucks are going to go out there and score 120 points without Giannis, which is a pretty tall ask as far as I see it, the Heat have the advantage in this series. And honestly, they should, because Giannis is an MVP caliber player. And when you don't have that, granted, Chris Middleton has been playing pretty solid in this series so far for the Bucks. Drew Holiday, pretty decent. But after you get past that, you're dealing with some role players. You're dealing with Bobby Portis, Brooke Lopez, Pat Connaughton. I mean, is that going to be enough? More than likely, probably not. Now, if Giannis were able to come back into this series, I think this series swings heavily in favor of Milwaukee because I think that Giannis will bring that stabilizing force to the Bucks, which would be a good sight for them at this point. I think that would get them back into the series, and it could potentially lead them to win this series in 6 or 7 games. But if Giannis does not come back in the series, this is the Heat's series as far as I see it. Because if they were to hypothetically lose this series against the Bucks without Giannis, you want to talk about a bad look? Kind of putting it into a description is kind of tricky for me because the Heat should win this series pretty convincingly if the Bucks didn't have their number one player to go with. So obviously we've got game 4. I'm expecting that the Heat are going to continue the dominance that they had in game 3. I think that Jimmy Butler's going to go out there and have a similar type of performance that he's had throughout most of the games in the series. He's going to put up probably 25 to 30 points. He could put up even 35, especially with the way that he's been playing so far. And they've been getting good contributions across the board. Even Duncan Robinson had a pretty nice game in game 3. I believe he had damn near 20 points in game 3. They're getting good contributions from Bam Adebayo. Obviously it sucks that they don't have Tyler Hero because he can go out there and give you another 15 to 20 points consistently as well. So, as far as I see it, with the series going into game 4, I doubt that Giannis is going to play. I know that he's been questionable on the injury report, but the Bucks have been pretty quick to list him as out going into these game time decisions. So I'm not really banking on the idea that Giannis comes back for game 4. If he does, that's a huge plus for the Bucks, but I'm going to go with the Heat simply just because I can't bank on Giannis playing in game 4. I think if Giannis comes back, it could potentially be game 5, and then the Bucks would have to potentially win 3 games in a row to get to the next round. And I think at this point, that may be too big of a hole to come out of as far as I see it. So I think it's the way that I see it currently, this is the Heat series from here on out. And really, it's in their hands at this point as far as I see it.
It's weird for me because everyone knows I love Jimmy Butler. He might literally be probably my favorite player in the NBA, if not one of. I can't definitively say that this series is over, even if Giannis is out for the remainder of it. Here's why. This is why statistics are so important. When you talk about the Miami Heat and where they fall in the NBA in their order of most efficient offenses, most competent offenses, I think the Heat were 25th in overall offense. They are shooting ridiculously from the field and from behind the three-point line. 53% from the field, 48.5 equivalently, 49% from three, 88% from the free throw line. They're limiting turnovers. They had 13, so it's not great, but it's not horrible. I don't think they can keep this up. I truly and honestly don't think they're going to be able to do this on a consistent night in and night out basis. Again, I know that this is only a 2-1 series lead at the moment. Depending on Giannis's availability, we all know that he is a defensive player of the year type of caliber player. We know that Drew Holiday is a great perimeter defender and so on and so forth, right? It don't make no difference at this point because the Heat are just shooting the lights out. And I'm not trying to say that they suck or that, shooting is easy, but you have Jimmy going 12 of 19. You got Duncan Robinson, who's only getting minutes because Victor Oladipo went down, Tyler Hero went down, so they need somebody to step up. And Duncan, in his first meaningful game, plays 24 minutes, 7 of 9, 5 of 6 from the three-point line, scores 20 points with a plus-minus of positive 24. I think it was also his birthday, too, so happy belated to Duncan. I cannot expect them to carry this out on a night in and night out basis. I know that I said that prior to game 2, and Milwaukee ends up winning that game as well, but it's not like Milwaukee's struggling either because you have a good number of players that are providing good numbers. Grayson Allen, a role player, goes for 14. Drew Holiday goes for 19. Well, he had 5 turnovers, though. Then you talk about Chris Middleton. He had 5 turnovers, but he puts up 23 points, 6 assists, and 5 boards. They're doing everything they can, but Bobby Portis had his worst game of the series, and he only had 9 points. Brook Lopez isn't someone that's going to go out there and get you 15, 20, but we know that he can. He only had can't say only. He only had 3 made field goals out of 9 attempts. So I don't necessarily know where they can improve. They only shot 12 free throws, but made 8, so that's 66% from the free throw line, which obviously is well below league average. It's just like Milwaukee's really struggling to find their groove offensively, at least consistently, because we know games 1 and game 3 were in favor of the Heat, and they finally got it going in game 2. We got to really see what Milwaukee's made of, man. This is why we said that it's very weird to see that despite missing their best player, arguably a top 3 player in the NBA, it shouldn't mean that they're this bad without him. It truly and honestly shouldn't. This isn't like the Dallas Mavericks where like Luka Doncic is the only named player before the Kyrie Irving trade. And you got to rely on a bunch of role players, if not like bench players, to go and step up outside of maybe notably Tim Hardaway Jr. at the time. This is Chris Middleton, an all-star. Drew Holiday, potential all-star, arguably one of the best, if not the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Bobby Portis, a 6 Man of the Year candidate. Brook Lopez, who's a notable veteran, big man who can stretch the floor and become a defensive, not liability, a defensive anchor in terms of protecting the rim. And you have some solid players on the bench. Goran Dragic, you went out and signed him for a reason. Joe Ingles, a veteran in this league. You have Pat Connaughton, who gave them meaningful minutes when they won the championship a few seasons. Obviously, you have Jay Crowder, who people are trolling really, really hard, especially Twitter people and Suns fans. Like, oh, yeah, let's hold out and make sure you want to have a bigger role and then only play 13 minutes in game 3 and score 5 points. So I don't know why Suns fans are the biggest trolls and biggest clowns on the earth. Because when they're losing, they're silent. But when they're winning, they talk a lot of shit. But yeah, like they have notable players. This team is deep. They have a lot of experience, and yet they're struggling. So that's why I say if Miami comes back down to earth when it comes to shooting the basketball, and Milwaukee can just find a way to get into a rhythm, I think truly and honestly this can become a competitive series. Now, if Giannis were to come back in game 4 or game 5, maybe it'll be a difference. But if Miami finds a way to go up 3-1, all Miami needs to do is have one more positive game with or without Giannis on the opposite side of the floor. It may be too big of a deficit for the Bucks to come back from, but I will say it is quite the impressive run thus far for the Miami Heat, being the 8th seed and the last team to get into the NBA playoffs.